we are doing a special episode on the Peter Sellers movie, arguably the Peter Sellers movie, 1967's Casino Royale.
Ostensibly the Peter Sellers movie.
Yeah. I'm Susan Tekla-Kuklinski, and you are?
I'm Joe Dater. I'm Joe Buy My Book Dater.
What is I'm noticing there's a tower next to you. What the heck?
Yes, just this week my book was released, Inked Cartoons, Confessions, Secret Sketches, and Rejected Ideas from the New Yorker's Joe Dater. It's a collection of hundreds of my cartoons, behind the scenes sketches, and fun stuff. And you can get that wherever books are sold.
You know what the best part is? The author's photo. I took the author's photo.
Picture of me in the back of the book. That actually was taken by you.
Yeah.
Photographed by you. They even got your name on there.
Go to Amazon just to read Jamie Lee Curtis's rave review of it.
Yes. And
so really, for real.
Yeah, I got
since it's Halloween.
Beautiful endorsement from the famous Halloween actress Jamie Lee Curtis, and a tacit endorsement from her husband, the director, Christopher Guest.
Now, just quick, I'm in a new place. I moved. I'm in a
location.
Undisclosed location. No, I'm not in an undisclosed location. You might be in an undisclosed location.
I am in an undisclosed location.
I'm in Hamilton Heights, New York City. On my Rosemary's Baby podcast, I told everyone I was moving to LA, and then COVID hit, and then I didn't. But you know what? I'm a New Yorker. Like, I am a tried and true, like, dyed in the wool. What can I do? I got to live here. This is where I live. I'm sitting on the floor. You know, I'm holding my mic because I just don't have a table even. I mean, I have like a mattress on the floor, you know, that kind of thing. As we, you know, from our last Patreon episode, Joe just ended up homeless. And so he's in an undisclosed location. And so we're both in like kind of crazy land. So yeah. So anyway, but we were just like, this we got to do is Casino Royale.
Have you seen the 2006 Casino Royale?
Yes.
You know the scene where they force Daniel Craig to sit in a chair and then they torture him by repeatedly whacking his balls?
Yes.
I thought of something that worse they could have done to him once they forced him to sit in a chair.
What's that, Joe?
They could have made him watch the 1967 Casino Royale.
But I thought this was worth going through because it's a you know, as we say on the show, it's an artifact. It's like
certainly it is a 60s time capsule.
It's eye candy. It's you know what? Here's what you do. You watch it at double speed. Really, no kidding. Or maybe 1.5. Listening to what they're saying will only confuse you. It'll be the whole story will be much more apparent if you watch this at 1.5 speed and like barely pay attention to the dialogue. Am I wrong?
I would suggest simply skipping the movie entirely and purchasing the soundtrack and listening to the Burt Bacharach songs.
No, it's worth zooming through. This is a movie worth zooming through. Let's give a little background information. There's a whole complicated story with this movie. There had already been 4 Bond movies with Sean Connery. The Broccoli Saltzman, you know, Eon series already had 4 movies out. But interestingly, the rights for Casino Royale were separate. And somebody else had bought it. And I'm not going to get into the whole history of it, but it kind of got passed around and ended up in the hands of one Charles Feldman. Is that his name? Charles Feldman?
Yes.
Yeah, Charles Feldman. Now, Charles Feldman was the guy who did What's New Pussycat, which had just come out relatively recently, starring Peter Sellers and Peter O'Toole and Woody Allen. And Woody Allen was the first film he ever wrote. He was not happy with that film, but it was actually a huge hit. Burt Bacharach music. That was the second movie to ever have Burt Bacharach music. The reason they decided to make this James Bond into a comedy was because the Sean Connery movies were so successful. They thought, we can't compete with that. Like, it's pointless to make a serious James Bond movie when you have Sean Connery just knocking it out of the park to such huge success left and right. So, yeah, makes sense, right?
Yeah, and the idea to do it as a kind of a spoof makes sense. Like right now, if you were making a superhero movie, it wouldn't make sense to try to compete with the Marvel universe. You would do it as a comedy, as a parody.
People are just nuts about Sean Connery as Bond.
Yeah, it's hard to describe what a sensation the Bond films were by this time. It was the Beatles. It was the Beatles and Bond. Those were the 2 Bs of the 60s.
So they decided to make a spoof, and What's New Pussycat was a hit. He decided to bring in some of the same people, and Sellers kind of dug his heels in, and he got a lot of money, you know, a fair amount of money for this, like $750,000. And a Rolls Royce, and a white Rolls Royce for doing this. He had a lot of control at the beginning. He had made a lot of suggestions as far as how to get this movie off the ground. Now, the script for this movie is another really long story that you can kind of just read the Wikipedia entry for. But interestingly, it began way in the beginning when they hadn't decided to make this a spoof. One of the first early writers was Ben Hetch, who is just a legend. I mean, he goes way back. He wrote Stagecoach, Hitchcock's notorious Spellbound. He wrote Gunga Din. He wrote the Hawks version of Scarface. He's just a legend. So that's Ben Hecht sort of started the whole thing. And of course, there's hardly any of that in there, just a couple of little elements. And then it got passed around for improvement to Joseph friggin' Heller, Catch 22 author Joseph Heller.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Billy Wilder took a whirl at it, and it just got knocked around. And nobody was happy with the script. It ended up, Peter Sellers insisted they get Terry Southern to write some dialogue. And a lot of people really participated. Only a few people got writing credits, but it was really a whole bunch of participants, including some people who were writing for like David Frost, people knocking around the BBC who Peter Sellers liked, who nobody else really ever heard of, and that kind of thing. So it was too many cooks. And the director chosen was by Peter Sellers. The director was chosen by Peter Sellers. It was Joseph McGrath,
who he had worked with many times before.
In television. Yeah, in television. He had done an Academy Award nominated short that was kind of legendary, but otherwise he's just a kind of a TV guy.
He also directed Peter Cook and Dudley Moore on their TV series, I believe, on their sketch comedy show.
They knew that Sellers was comfortable with him, and Sellers starts suggesting people to come in. They wanted Shirley MacLaine. There was a lot of maybe people, but one person that they wanted, because in the Casino Royale story is the famous villain Le Chiffre. Peter Sellers suggested Orson Welles, and they freaking got him. They got Orson Welles. Amazing. And pretty amazing. They got Woody Allen back in, and he ended up contributing a little bit of writing, especially his own. They got Ursula Andress, who had been, of course, in Dr. No. He had wanted Sophia Loren. That's who he wanted, but that he didn't get her.
She wouldn't talk to him anymore.
They wanted Britt Eklund, and during this movie, they started splitting up. That was not going well. So they got Ursula Andress. I mean, you can't do better than that anyway. And one of the things about this movie is, if you're a Bond fan, as bad as this movie famously is, it's a treat for Bond fans, because sprinkled through the whole movie are like a million people who were in the other Bond movies, or
That's true,
or who would be in the future Bond. There's just like a million. And again, we're not going to go through all that because that's going to take a half hour. In just even tiny little bit parts sprinkled throughout the movie are all Bond affiliated. So it's kind of interesting there.
And also at the beginning, it says suggested by the novel Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. It doesn't say based on, it says suggested by. And I haven't read the novel, but I'm pretty sure there's almost nothing from the book left.
The only thing from the book is the card game with Le Chiffre.
It's the card game, and weirdly, the ball torture chair makes an appearance.
It does.
Kind of. I was like, wait a minute, that's the bottomless chair where they tortured Daniel Craig's balls.
It was, there's a big hole at the bottom.
Right.
It's really winking towards that.
Don't worry about that chair with a hole in the middle. It's merely waiting to be reupholstered.
By me.
They're really saying, that's what we're doing.
And that, of course, that comes directly out of the novel.
Yeah.
I was very surprised that somehow that made it all the way through.
That survived. Now, let's just mention also, there was one more Casino Royale before this, which was the television version, which was the first iteration ever, besides the novel, the first visual iteration of James Bond, was our pal Barry Nelson, who played Mr. Ullman.
Le Chiffre, to best of my recollection, was Peter Lorre.
Peter friggin' Lorre. So it was Barry Nelson, who was Ullman in Shining. So we had talked about that in my Shining podcast. And then Peter Lorre was the villain. It was an hour long, one of those theater productions that they used to do way back in the 50s. And I think it was like 53 or something like that. And it's pretty cool. You can find that on YouTube. It's a very bad quality, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun.
It's an old sort of like kinescope where they would literally point a film camera at the screen of a live TV broadcast and film it that way.
Yeah. And you'll see the overlap of this scene, the scene with Orson Welles and Peter Sellers with that. That's the only thing that was really, that's kind of the centerpiece of the book, was they're playing Baccarat. So that's the only thing that survived. The only thing that survived from the original Ben Hetch script was this little concept that he tucked in there, that they decide that James Bond, if he dies, or he does die, he may have actually died in the original script, they decide to confuse the enemy Schmersh, they decide to recruit to name a lot of their spies James Bond, just to make this confusion in the land of spies. They're going to have pseudonyms for all these spies would be James Bond.
From now on, all remaining agents and trainees will be known as James Bond 007, including the girls.
Won't that be rather confusing, sir?
Exactly. The enemy won't know which way to turn.
Which is part of the problem.
It really is. It just makes it an absolute incoherent mess. They sold the movie by saying, it's too much for one Bond, and there were 7 James Bonds in this. The whole idea that came back, 40 years later, that James Bond is a code name, is now one of the biggest fan theories on Reddit. People have endless discussions about it, and they're trying to reconcile how the entire timeline of Bond films can actually be seen as one single continuity if you factor in that James Bond is not the same person, it's a code name. And that's actually in this movie. Canonically, it's rather remarkable, in fact, because that is now a prevailing theory of James Bond lore.
There's just 2 little things I want to say also before we begin. One is this movie did really well. This movie actually did really well. It broke records, and it's terrible, but it did. People wanted to see it. Some theorize that's because the poster was so kick-ass, and it is. Yeah. So the poster was by the legend Robert McGinnis, who is just, if you don't know him, Google image him and you'll recognize instantly his style from the 60s. He did a lot of book covers. He did Breakfast at Tiffany's poster. And this, I think, is just absolutely his best work. Like, of what I've seen is just gorgeous, and it's sexy, and it's so cool. It's so cool. The other thing is that it was The Look of Love. The Burt Bacharach song Look of Love became a huge hit. The look of love is in your eyes. It was nominated for an Oscar, lost to Talk to the Animals. If I could talk to the animals.
Oh God,
the sound of it. Da, 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 da. I mean, come on.
Dr. Dolittle. At least they made some good James Bond movies. They've made 1,000 Dr. Dolittle movies, and not one of them has been any good.
Yeah.
The soundtrack is so great. It's the quintessential sort of swinging 60s soundtrack.
Right. So Herb Alpert is all over this. Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. They kind of do the theme. It's not my favorite Herb Alpert theme. I find it a little annoying. But I can see why people would love it. I mean, it's definitely, especially back then, it was kind of fresh sounding. For some reason, I find it a little too hokey, and they play it so much through the movie. I feel like it's a little heavy-handed, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. It's filled with kind of cool music and lots of references, to Burt Bacharach and other. They have a reference to whipped cream and other delights and all this. There's lots of fun stuff like that. The soundtrack is famous for being one of the most masterfully pressed analog records ever pressed. It's a huge collector's item. They just did such an outstanding job, especially the recording of Look of Love, and it's just considered like the greatest analog pressing in the history of records. Let's run through the movie sequentially, because
I'll say it starts out already completely incoherent. It has a great animated title sequence by Richard Williams, the classic British animator who did the animated title sequences for the Pink Panther movies. Yeah. And it's gorgeous work, but it also spoils the ending. And it literally shows you what happens in the ending of the film in the opening credits. Yeah. And it also spoils the little surprise celebrity cameos that are going to come throughout by telling you who's going to come and who's going to be there, and showing you their little clip, showing you their picture of what. Yeah. And I think the only one it doesn't spoil in the opening credits is Peter O'Toole's cameo. And it may have been because Peter O'Toole said, no, I don't want to be credited in this film at all.
Yeah, I don't think he was. I think he's totally uncredited.
I don't want it in writing that I'm in this movie.
A lot of people felt that way. A lot of people who contributed to the writing and directing were like, no, don't put me on. No, don't put me on. So the other thing to know is, so we started with Joseph McGrath, but in the end, there were 5 directors, but really there were more than that. There are people who just didn't want to be named as the director, but really, basically there were 5 directors, including John Huston, which is a bit mind-boggling.
And John Huston's in the film, and he plays a man who is supposed to be Scottish, but of course, John Huston can only do one voice, and that's the John Huston voice. He can only sound like John Huston, which he does. He can't sound like anyone but John Huston. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, why is John Huston in this? And then I remember, John Huston's in Battle for the Planet of the Apes. John Huston would do anything.
All right. You know, the best John Huston that everybody has to look up if you don't know it already is The Visitor from 1979. The Visitor
I haven't
from
seen that one.
1979. It's a sci-fi horror movie, and it is really, 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 you just got to see it. So,
All right.
yeah, you just got to see it. Like this movie where Peter Sellers left early, and they had to just take the scraps that Peter Sellers left them, take that like outtakes and whatever little bits of film that they had of Peter Sellers, and try to throw it into the movies to just pad the movie. They actually had to do that with John Huston too. You'll see in the end, like, oh my gosh, what they do with John Huston is just all right. So let's just start this off. John Huston directed the first part. At this point, the movie was already in tatters. They kind of did the beginning towards the end because they were like, how are we going to glue all this together? Here's a quote about putting this movie together. Each director had no idea what the other directors were doing. The result was total chaos. Units were shooting in 3 separate studios. None of the directors had ever seen a completed script. No single director knew what any of the others were doing, and not until they all sat down and saw it all cut together did they realize they had been conned into a total pile of garbage.
God, I was watching the movie and thinking the worst thing I can say about this is it looks as if no 2 directors knew what the other one was doing. And then that turns out to be a direct quote. I was going to make that as an off-the-cuff burn of the movie, but it's real.
Yeah, that's a direct quote. That's from The Life and Death of Peter Sellers,
Okay.
and it's a quote from an actual director.
So obvious when you watch the movie that, yeah, there were multiple directors and they clearly did not meet at any point to discuss what the other one was doing.
And then because Peter Sellers left early, he just said, I'm not doing this anymore. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Before his roles were finished. They also had to go backwards and retrofit, so that they could make this movie make sense, but it never ended up making sense. It never ended up making sense. Yeah. Let me do one more and then we'll really launch into this. Wolf Mankiewicz was one of the writers, no relation to the famous Mank. He had known Peter Sellers. They had wanted to do something together, like put a production company together, and it had fallen apart, and they had a little bit of bad blood. But so here's what Wolf Mankiewicz, who did write, he participated in the writing of this. Here's what he has to say about Peter Sellers. He was a treacherous lunatic. My advice to Charles Feldman was not in any circumstance to get involved with Sellers, but Sellers was at his peak at the time. I told Charles that Sellers would fuck everything up, and he wanted different directors. He wanted to piss around with the script. So that's just, again, a little bit of
and all of that is very much in evidence in the movie. It's not like they were able to disguise what he just said there, because it's very obvious in the movie that Sellers didn't care and that he was basically trying to outwardly sabotage the movie.
We begin with what's, again, trying to explain this whole movie, which is David Niven is the original James Bond. He's supposed to be the original James Bond, which actually Ian Fleming had wanted David Niven to be the original James Bond. So it kind of works out. He finally got to do it. And he's living in some mansion. He's retired. He doesn't want to spy anymore. So John Huston decided to play M. This was actually the first significant role John Huston ever did in front of the camera, acting. So they're all in a car driving out to see David Niven's James Bond character to try to get him back in the fray and on this case. And on their way, they come upon a group of lions. What is it called? What's a group of lions called?
That is a pride of lions.
A pride of lions. And the lions jump on the car and don't attack them. And this is the first sign that there's going to be a lot of stuff in this movie that
it just goes nowhere.
It goes nowhere.
Nowhere. And the lion jumps up, and then the soundtrack goes into a little parody of the Born Free theme, because that was a big deal at the time. And then nothing. And then there's no joke. There's nothing. There's just, look,
apparently,
lions and Born Free, and there it is.
It's a little nod to the fact that Born Free, the song, had beat out Burt Bacharach the year before at the Academy Awards.
I guess that's clever or something or whatever, but we're 3 minutes into a movie and we want to know what's going on. I mean, it starts out so unengagingly, endless exposition. There's these dry, boring scenes of these guys meeting, and it's all filmed in the most unengaging way possible. It's all shot in a way that you just don't care, and you don't know why you're watching this, and you don't know what's happening.
They go visit Bond. They tell him that we want you to come back and be back in service. And he's like, no, I'm not coming back. I have this black rose in my garden. Look at this black rose.
Out there is a black rose, not dark red, but black, as a raven's wing at midnight.
and you're like, okay, that black rose is certainly going to figure back into this
It's gonna
story
figure
somehow.
back eventually. No, yeah.
You're never going to see that black rose again.
No, never, ever, ever.
It is just, the whole movie is just so much of this stuff.
There's a couple of jokes which you kind of get a little bit of a chuckle about, because it's like these meta jokes where David Niven, as the real James Bond, is saying, what about that sex maniac you gave my name and number to?
You know, that sexual acrobat who leaves a trail of beautiful dead women like blown roses behind him.
And he's sort of obliquely referring to the Sean Connery films,
Right.
you know, and in this one, the real James Bond is sort of moral and uptight, and he has a stammer and
Right.
and a very poorly portrayed stammer, by the way.
Which disappears
yeah.
at some point.
Oh, by the way, Moneypenny, since I came in here, have you noticed me stammer?
No, sir.
Splendid. Let me know if I do. I haven't got time for that now.
He's back in the spy game because they blow up his house.
Right. So that's an
makes no
interesting scene.
sense.
So he says, no way, I'm not going back in. And so the gentleman who came to meet him, one was a KGB guy, one was a
Right. It was like a
guess
group of espionage guys from around the world.
from around the world. Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 of them. And so they're gathered together, and they're like, well, you know, he never wanted to go back in after Mata Hari broke his heart. Mata Hari broke his heart, and he's just never been the same. Niven does a final, no, I'm not going back in. And M gives the signal, which is lighting a cigar. These people who are hiding shoot off some missiles and blow up his entire house, which is supposed to just be like, well, this is too bad. You have to do this. Now, as this is happening, as the house is being blown up, John Huston's M's toupee goes flying off.
His toupee goes flying off.
His toupee goes flying
Yeah.
off. And that's pretty much the last you see of him. His toupee flying off.
In the next scene, he's dead.
He's dead.
Strangely, weirdly.
And you're like, wait,
We never
wait,
see him.
what?
He died in the house explosion, but he wasn't in the house. He was standing next to David Niven.
He
who
wasn't
didn't
anywhere
die.
near the house. So it's so funny, because you're supposed to just
tons of that
accept.
stuff. There's
You're supposed
tons
to
of
just
this
accept
stuff,
that
like,
he's dead, and you're like, wait, why?
so what
How is
happened?
How is he dead? How could he
Yeah.
possibly be dead?
Yeah.
The only thing that happened was his toupee blew off. Anyway,
And then
so
we get about a half an hour of the most excruciating part of the movie.
okay,
where-
so this is
Oh,
still
gosh.
being directed by John Huston. Now, the beautiful, wonderful, legendary, gorgeous Deborah Kerr.
Deborah
I mean-
Kerr, born in Glasgow. She does a very
Yeah.
good Scottish accent in the film 100 years ago. So if she was alive today, she'd be 100 years old.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, when she filmed this, she was 45, by the way. She's about 45.
Actually, it looks good.
But she is gorgeous. She is just sexy and gorgeous. And I mean, this woman, okay, let me just
Beautiful. She's wonderful. And I feel bad for her.
let me just tell you that, just quickly, I have to say the things she had done before she did this role. This is all just leading right up to this role. Okay. So she was in The King and I, Black Narcissus, which, if you haven't seen,
I
oh my
haven't
God,
seen- no.
From Here to Eternity, Tea and Sympathy, An Affair to Remember, Heaven Knows Mr. Allison, Separate Tables, The Sundowners, The Innocents, The Grass is Greener, which is Stanley Donen, The Night of the Iguana, King Solomon's Mines, Quo Vadis, Marlon Brando's Julius Caesar, Bonjour Tristesse with David Niven, which is an Otto Preminger film. And the last thing she did before she did this movie, which is probably one of the more cheesy movies that she ever did, was The Eye of the Devil, which is a really cool horror movie with David Niven.
What are you seeking, Philippe?
Am I seeking? Or am I being sought?
Donald Pleasance, David Hemmings, Blowout, and
That's a
Sharon,
cast of some of the
and
spooky-
Sharon Tate,
some
and,
of the spookiest English guys.
and Sharon Tate. And there's actually a rumor that movie was they gotten advice on that movie from real witches and blah blah blah. It's a really interesting story. But anyway, I highly recommend that movie too. But anyway, but the point is, Deborah Kerr. Oh my gosh, she does a rape joke. It's like Deborah Kerr doing a rape joke.
Raped by the Campbells in 1622, in retaliation of which Lord Douglas sent his only son, Hamish, out to rape twa Campbell lasses.
At the same time,
Eldest first, of course, as prescribed by scripture.
It's not good. It's not good.
There's like a half hour of just interminable nonsense.
It's
And
nonsense.
and it's all basically based on, look, these people are Scottish. Like we're in Scotland and we're in this mansion and everybody's Scottish and they're being really Scottish and it's supposed to be, and it's funny. It's supposed to be funny. You're
And they
supposed to laugh.
apparently wanted to hammer the Scottish stuff to make fun of Sean Connery. But it's like, what are you doing? Like,
It's
what
again,
are you
it's
doing?
like, no, the audience doesn't care.
The audience
You're
doesn't care.
Making fun of Sean Connery.
A few references would be funny.
Monty
but
Python did it much better. if you want to make fun of Scottish people, they did it much better.
Science fiction sketch.
So she's supposed to be a spy who is pretending to be M's widow, right? The thing is, they're trying to seduce David Niven's James Bond so that they make him look bad. They're trying to make him look corrupt him. Yeah. So there's all these young, beautiful women who are supposed to be all the daughters of John Huston, M's daughter, who died, right?
How many of you are there? Daughters, I mean.
11 in all.
11? My word. And how do the ages? Ages run. Who is how young is the youngest?
16.
And the eldest?
19.
So they're trying to seduce him. They get in the bathtub with him and, all this body British stuff.
Well, then I have to mention at this moment that my only sort of memories of seeing this as a very impressionable 9-year-old are of David Niven getting into the bathtub with a naked girl and thinking at the time that blew my mind at the time and changed me deeply inside. It had an effect on my brain. It was the sexiest thing I had ever seen in my life. And my life had lasted 9 years at that point. So I didn't have much to choose from. So that was in fact the sexiest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I had no idea what it meant or what the feelings it was inspiring in me meant, but I knew it was something good.
Yeah.
I was kind of obsessed with it.
I will say that the girl in the bathtub is outstandingly adorable. Like she is so cute.
I'm testing the temperature of the water.
I'll never forget Buttercup.
It's disturbing because she's supposed to be 17, so it's disturbing. But she's like she
age
really
of
nails
consent
it.
in the UK at the time was 16. So,
but she nails it. She nails that part.
Do you like your back scrubbed?
She's so cute, and she's not even thin. She's like this chubby little girl. She's so cute.
Well, of course,
so cute.
I mean, she's a 1960s Scottish girl.
Well, so Deborah Carr tries to make a pass at David Niven's James Bond.
I hereby claim a widow's due, according to Mactari tradition. Let me be comforted. Doodle me.
And he rejects her. So she says, well, if you reject me, you have to be challenged to wrestle with these like big Scottish bodyguards.
Yeah, big Scottish bodyguards. There's those bagpipes and everyone's like got a red beard glued on, and it's all this stuff. Honestly, when the aliens came down and turned ordinary people into Scotsmen on Monty Python, that sketch lasted 3 minutes, and it was 10 times funnier than the half an hour of Scottish-based humor in this.
Yeah, and so they're playing this game where they're lifting giant rocks and throwing it, and like you said, it just goes on. The gags are so bad.
They just fall to the floor like a bag of sand. And then she turns French all of a sudden.
Mais c'est incroyable! Quelle force! Quelle majesté! Vraiment, il est superbe!
Like she realizes she's in love with David Niven and starts speaking in French.
Yeah.
And that's the sign that, oh no, it's too late. She's fallen in love. She's French now.
Yeah.
And music in the background is telling you you're having a good time. The music is insisting that you're having a good time throughout the entire movie. One thing I want to point out about this section of the movie, though, it is where you see the second of the cast members of Dr. Strangelove, Tracy Reed.
Is that where she is? I couldn't pick her out.
She's part of the grouse shoot where the grouse are really bombs and James Bond has to shoot at them. It's all
I was looking for her, but I just couldn't catch that.
And Tracy Reed, we know, is the girl in the bikini who is in bed with George C. Scott when he answers the telephone to come to
she's
work.
the only female in the whole film. You can't miss her.
The only female character in the film you can't miss.
So it ends with a grouse shooting thing where his pants button is a homing device, and they have fake missiles and slingshots and yeah, okay. So yeah, she goes off to a convent. She decides because she's fallen in,
Right.
really
That
in
it
love
just
with him.
makes no sense. She literally runs off. She leaves the scene and goes into the hills because there's a convent over there. You're thinking, can we get to Peter Sellers? When's
Yeah.
Peter Sellers coming?
Okay, so we have like the most boring car chase you ever saw in your whole life. And then we meet Moneypenny, which is Moneypenny's daughter. They set up Woody Allen. And I still don't understand it. I still don't understand it.
They say, oh, he's supposed to be David Niven's nephew, Jimmy Bond. We cut to him. He's in Central America and he's being taken to a firing squad for some reason. It doesn't matter why. Who cares?
Nobody knows. Yeah. And he's just doing 100% Woody Allen improv.
Listen, you can't shoot me. I have a very low threshold of death. My doctor says I can't have bullets enter my body at any time.
You've heard them 1,000 times.
I can't get shot at this time. It would be really, really bad time for me.
You realize this means an angry letter to the Times.
Then he escapes from the firing squad heroically, like some sort of badass supervillain, and says, "So long, suckers," which is literally the complete opposite of the character that he's shown himself to be up to that point in the movie. Yeah. So it's like a stupid scene that ends on a punchline that makes no sense.
You're not going to see him again.
You won't see him until the end.
Just tuck that into the back of your brain, like the Black Rose and the Lions. But you may actually retrieve that later. Moneypenny has to choose some new bonds. And so she's like kissing, she's in a negligee and she's like kissing a rose. There's a lot of that sort of thing. There's a lot of
for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has to pick like a bunch of new James Bonds, and who's the guy she picks what's his name? Cooper, yeah. Terrence Cooper, who was, I guess, a famous actor at the time. He's got top billing in this, and then he has to prove that he can fight off women and that he's not swayed by sexy women. So they bring a line of sexy women in to try to seduce him, and again, all the while the music is just joyous. The music is just, isn't this fun? Look how hilarious and fun and great this is. Like, it's a real example of like prime 60s sexism, or as I like to call it, the good old days. Things were loose and free, and it was free love, and everybody was getting it on, and it was all really, really, really good for the men.
I thought that the lineup,
maybe not as much for the women.
I thought the lineup, her picking out a Bond was a little bit of a flip of that. Like, they were trying to make a feeble attempt to just do one little thing for the ladies where she's picking the guy. So Ursula Andress, Vesperlin, she obviously was in Dr. No. That was her big thing. That was her, debut. And she only did a couple of little movies in between this. Ursula Andress. So she was in What's New Pussycat pretty early in her career, but she's pretty good. I think she does really well in this movie.
Well, it's interesting because they have her here, and obviously she was in Dr. No, the first James Bond film with Sean Connery. And so they got her, but they also got the same actress from Dr. No to dub her voice.
Yes. So they set her up to they wanted her to recruit this very, very good card player, very, very good Baccarat player.
The guy who wrote the book on Baccarat, and that's Peter Sellers.
That's Evelyn Trimble. Evelyn Trimble is his name. So they convinced her to do this. She approaches him in a casino and, does the whole batting her eyes thing. Yeah, the seductive thing. He goes to her place, and it's this really cool, tricked out apartment. Now, one of the best things about this movie is the production design.
Yeah, looks great.
Everything looks pretty great. The colors are amazing.
The music, those are two good things.
And the costumes are so good. The costumes are so great. So there were people working hard on this movie, doing a good job. If only you could take the talent of the costume designer and put it into the writing. I don't know. It's just how did these,
It's hard to put myself into the mentality of a person who would sabotage the movie because he felt like he wasn't treated well because he got up on the wrong side of the bed that day. And this brings us to Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers, one of the most gifted comic actors of the 20th century. And in this movie, he makes sure you don't know it.
Yes.
Because he's terrible in the movie. We just talked about being there, and being there is great because he's underplaying his performance. And he's giving this very subtle, brilliant, beautiful performance in being there. And in this, he's underplaying it to the point where you wonder why they hired him. Why is he even there? Because he's doing pretty much nothing. from reading the book, what was going on with him at the time was he had slimmed down to an absurd degree. He had gone on crash diets and he's remarkably thin in this film, and supposedly was a bit, cocky about it. And he had gotten it in his head that he had leading man looks and should be James Bond for real. So he decided he was going to play this as if he was being hired to be James Bond or Cary Grant or some romantic leading man,
Right.
and not a comedian.
And people are saying this was just his peak worst self. He immediately, one of the first things he did was punch Joe McGrath. At some point they got into an argument and they got into a fist fight and he threw the first punch. This was a good friend of his, so again, Britt Eklund at this point was leaving him. So he was going chasing after her. Also, that's one of the reasons he kept leaving. So, all right. So let's just get back to the scene with Ursula Andress.
Peter Sellers goes back to her bedroom and he's playing this. He's almost deliberately playing it bland. And then they have him dress up in costumes for no apparent reason.
And do accents. And it's
just
as if
because he
here's
can't. Well, it's Peter Sellers. We got to have him do that.
Here's the obligatory Peter Sellers doing voices, doing funny voices and funny accents. It's really sad. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad.
It enters into the plot about as much as The Black Rose does.
Yeah.
And he's dressing up in costumes that she just happens to have in her bedroom closet. For example, an entire Hitler uniform.
Yeah.
One of two movies where Peter Sellers dresses up as Hitler.
And one of two movies where he dresses up as Toulouse-Lautrec.
That's true. That's right. He does it in one of the Pink Panther films as well.
Yeah, Vesperlin. So she convinces him. So she says, "I'll put up the money, and you have to, if you play Le Chiffre," which he always wanted to do something like this. Like it's a big challenge for him. It'd be exciting for him to do it. So she'll put up the money if he'll do it. And of course, what she really wants is for him to be another spy and defeat him so that he can't fund Smersh.
She recruits Peter Sellers, and they now give him the code name James Bond 007.
Yeah.
And they bring him in to meet Q and get the gadgets and everything. And now you have a scene where they're bringing in Peter Sellers to be the new James Bond, and they're teaching him how to be James Bond. And I'm thinking, now that's a movie.
Welcome to the James Bond 007 training school.
Right.
It's an hour into the movie, you get a scene that grabs you and goes, no, this is the movie I want to see. It's basically like Johnny English with Peter Sellers.
Yeah. So they do that whole thing where, here's all the crazy gadgets we have, and they do this and they do that. Although they don't even make hay with that as much as they should.
Yeah. And those gags aren't even very good.
Yeah, they're not very
good. For some reason, a little person is following him and he says, "Oh, I know who's trailing me." And it's the little person. And I guess that's supposed to be funny.
Right. That should have been the easiest. That should have been the easiest scene to write. You just get clever with the weapons. I mean, that's like made for a comedy, is like, coming up with these kind of parody James Bond weapons, and they totally flubbed on that one. They flubbed on that whole scene.
This seems to be a little bit tight around the
poison capsule compartment.
Well, I'm sure we can let it out above the switch blade and combined Geiger counter down there.
Then
I don't remember
David
how we get
Niven
to
has to
how
go
do we
to
get
India.
how do we get to Mata Bond? All right, so David Niven's Bond had an affair with Mata Hari, and the product of that affair was Mata Bond, which is this young, beautiful woman. And she's a dancer, and I don't know, he abandoned her when she was little, and you don't really remember or know why we end up going to this to see her.
I guess he's in India. Because
I guess
it
they're
looks
in
like
India,
but nobody's Indian.
Yeah,
It
but
doesn't
it's
matter
gorgeous
because it's all just an excuse to show these beautiful sets, and it's like a
gorgeous
big Broadway musical number. It's visuals that are great in another movie.
You look at that scene and you just think, imagine if this was a well-written movie. It would have been a really amazing movie. It would have been spectacular.
And then for some reason, they recruit her to be James Bond, and then she's got to go to Berlin. So they put her in a taxi. Bernard Cribbins, the British comic actor, is the taxi driver, who's very good. He comes off okay. He's funny. He's this Cockney taxi driver who drives her to Berlin, which is it's like, okay, that's sort of a funny gag.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, east or west, mate?" And then she walks into this place where I guess she's supposed to receive some special training from some special agents or something.
So it's her mother's dance school in Germany. It's Mata Hari dance school in Germany, but it's really what it really is a spy school. It's a spy school. So they have like a code cracking room, and they have a karate room, and it's all this movie. Throughout the movie, most of the spies, the extras, are female. For some, it's all like women code crackers, women karate experts, women who are sort of running. When the car chase scene happened with David Niven, there were women like overseeing that. Like it's sort of like the women are like the Oompa Loompas, or you know what I mean? It's like they're like the Oompa Loompa spies, or they're the minion spies. They're all like supposed to be identical, beautiful spies who are kind of running the show with the men at the top telling them what to do.
Austin Powers with the
right,
the fembots and all that. You get
right,
these
right,
like
right.
armies of badass women and things like that.
Well, every one of them gorgeous.
She walks into this dance school and she's walking into a German expressionist world, and all of these sets are constructed to look like there's something out of a Fritz Lang movie from the 20s or something like that, or like an old silent German movie, and it's beautiful. It just looks so good. It's amazing set design and production design in the service of such an incoherent nonsense script.
The other good part is the two people she meets. I think they're both wonderful.
A little Polo, she remembers me.
Welcome home, my child.
Welcome indeed.
Stop.
Ronnie Corbett doing the best he can. Him and Bernard Cribbins, both great British comedians. You remember Ronnie Corbett as one of the two Ronnies. Ronnie Barker was the big one. Ronnie Corbett was a small one.
I didn't know anything about him. He's 5'1".
Oh, look up the two.
Yeah, I was looking at him on YouTube because I really didn't know anything about him, and because I thought he was really great in this. Yeah.
They used to run the two Ronnies on WOR Channel 9 in New York.
Oh, really? No, I don't remember that at all.
Deuteronomy 22 verses 2 to 5.
Oh, I'm sorry. 2 Kings 8, 7 to 14.
Oh, really? You do surprise me. I should have thought Micah 2:40.
Oh, no, you're forgetting Zebediah 9, 13, down to I wot not what she gets.
Oh, of course. Ruth 13, 10 to 11.
No, the way I heard it, it was Daniel 3.
Oh, yes. But surely that would mean Nahum 7, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes, but surely not if it's done with taste.
No.
And then his partner here, the one who sort of runs the school, is Anna Quayle, who I didn't know anything about either. She was in A Hard Day's Night. And then before this movie, and then after this movie, she was in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
You're my little teddy bear, my lovey-dovey little teddy bear.
And she was just one of these, again, a BBC comedy television personality. I love her. I think she's amazing. Like, she looks like she should be like an SNL cast member kind of person.
Yeah, she's great.
She's great. There is one scene we should just mention, which is Miss Goodthighs.
I don't remember her at all, and I watched the movie yesterday.
That is Jacqueline Bisset.
Oh, right.
Jacqueline Bisset.
It's in the movie for no reason.
She's in the movie for no reason. It's just a useless scene just to pad the movie. So Jacqueline Bisset comes to the door now, but the reason it's significant is, first of all, this was Jacqueline Bisset had debuted in Cul-de-sac, the Polanski movie Cul-de-sac, just a little bit before this, just a couple of years before this. Great comedy movie. Now, Cul-de-sac, I really, really recommend that. What happened with Jacqueline Bisset on the set of this movie was Peter Sellers, as a joke, blasted a gun that had blanks in it in her face. This was the first time she met him.
Oh, yeah, right. He has to pull out a gun and pretend to shoot her or something.
Well,
or he has to shoot a thing out of her hand.
He did it when they weren't rolling. They weren't rolling. This was just when she just literally walked in to meet him on the set. He shoots it in her face without, just totally as a surprise. And it totally banged up her face. Like, she was bleeding all over the place. She thought she went blind. She couldn't see anything. She thought she had gone blind. She thought a real gun had gone off in her face. That's how scary it was. And then she realized, no, a real gun did not go on my face. It was a blank. But now I can't see anything. And it was horrifying. And when he did that, because she's holding a champagne bottle, she dropped the bottle on her foot and injured her foot, because that's very heavy too. Yeah. And she said she literally had PTSD with Peter Sellers the rest of the time she was with him.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. And the scene has, like, again, they padded it out with this like hallucination. She drugs him and he has this hallucination. It's just so ridiculous. It's just outtakes.
It goes into a little.
It's just outtakes.
Song and
it doesn't make sense. The song
there's no point to it at all.
The song is also painful to listen to.
Oh, he's not really such a wonderful spy, but winning lots of money and a gal, he's a fabulous guy.
I don't know. All right. So the card game, Le Chiffre.
You're like, what? We're an hour and 30 minutes into this movie, I think, at this point, maybe. And Peter Sellers comes into the casino and sits down, and he's James Bond, and across from him is the villain, and it's Orson Welles, and they're going to have this tense baccarat game. And again, you're sitting there and you're going, now this is a movie. Now
filmed in Panavision, filmed in that like extra long Panavision. So you could see one actor here and one actor here. That's what it's made for.
Right,
what
but
did
you
they-
can't
they-
because they're
you
never in the
can't.
same shot at the
You
same
can't.
time.
It's
And
so
if they
funny.
are, it's an over-the-shoulder double.
The fact that it's in Panavision makes it more pronounced that they are never in the same room.
Aren't you a little out of your depth, Mr. Bond? In the last 20 minutes, I have ruined 2 Greeks and a Maharaja. No, Mr. Bond, we aren't playing for marbles. The night is young, and the rose garden is already littered with my victims.
Yes, but the beggar who sat in marketplace are deaf to song of nightingale.
You amuse me, Mr. Bond. I'm glad you're enjoying me. Shall we, double the bank? If it'll improve your game.
He wanted Orson Welles to play Le Chiffre, but then at the same time, because he's a nut job, he was completely intimidated by Orson Welles. Before he even met Orson Welles, he was already suggesting that they film separately because he was already feeling weirded out by it. I think he was one of those people that just could psych his own self completely out. And it was because was this fragile narcissist. He's a real fragile narcissist where he's
He
a
really
narcissist,
was, yeah.
but underneath there's nothing there. He's just
Yeah.
terrified of everything.
One of the things I read was that Sellers was deliberately trying to get under his skin and get his hackles up by showing off how thin he was.
Yes. So there's several stories. There's, some of them are conflicting. There's one story where he said in an elevator, Wolf Mankiewicz was also a big guy. He was in the elevator with Wolf and Orson, and he said, "Gosh, I hope this elevator doesn't crash." This is Mankiewicz speaking. Orson and I are huge. Neither of us had seen Peter for quite a while. He said, "You've got very thin, Pete," thinking that perhaps he had been ill again. Sellers, who was perfectly well, did not disguise his distaste. Anyone, he told them, can get slim if they have discipline.
Real passive-aggressive dig.
Yeah, this apparently came up a lot. The thinness. Orson Welles would continually refer to him as that thin guy. This is from The Life and Death. Robert Parrish, who took the helm for a few days, found himself, Orson Welles, all the extras, and the crew made up and ready to work at 8:45 in the morning as per their contracts. Sellers did not arrive for another 2.25 hours. He'd stay in his car, circling Shepperton Studios, wasting time and abrading people's nerves on purpose. He had a telephone in his limousine, and he kept calling a lackey on the set for up-to-date reports on the general restlessness. Wells spent the morning telling anecdotes about his favorite restaurants and practicing magic tricks. When Sellers eventually arrived, ostentatiously disheveled and unbond-like, Wells boomed, "Welcome, Mr. Sellers. How good of you to join us." He had arranged for a spotlight to pick out the wretched star. "Let's have a big hand for Mr. Sellers." Sellers, momentarily startled and magnificently befooled, made himself into air. Nobody heard from him for 2 solid days, and he'd only come back on the condition that he had to never see Wells again. He claimed that Wells was trying to put a voodoo mind grip on him. Now, one more story is that Sellers was very good friends with Princess Margaret. And so he invited her on set, and he was telling Orson Welles, "Well, I'm going to introduce you to Princess Margaret." And I guess Orson was probably being a jerk and not telling him that he already knew Princess Margaret. And so Margaret walks on the set, and immediately the first thing she does is go, "Orson, I haven't seen you in days." And Peter Sellers, everybody agrees, was very humiliated by that.
I will say, the more you look up and read stories about Peter Sellers, the less you like him as a person. The more you look up and read stories about Orson Welles, the more you like him. I love Orson Welles in this because he's sort of parodying himself. He's pulling rabbits out of hats and doing card tricks and everything.
He levitates a woman, yeah.
I present you with the levitation of the Princess Aisha, an illusion taught to me by an ancient vegetarian in the mountain fastnesses of Tibet.
Yeah, and it's like he's on the Mike Douglas show almost. It's
Yeah,
like exactly
Orson-
what he used to do on Merv.
Yeah,
you know?
Orson Welles really was a very
and
accomplished
he would
magician.
pull out the magic tricks at parties and everything. And
Yeah.
and he always had the mysterious, he'd wear a cape and he'd be like, it's hard to say what is real or what isn't real. And he would just, do a card trick. He always had this incredible gravitas, and there was always a little wink in his eye that I
Yeah.
know this is all horseshit and ridiculous. It's theater. It's fun.
I just wanted to mention a few fun things about Orson Welles, since this is the Comedy Film Funnel, and we want to just hit those angles. So we talked about Christopher Lee doing heavy metal. Well, years before Christopher Lee did it, guess who did it first? He provided voice for songs by the band Manowar two songs.
Defender, ride like the wind, fight proud, my son. You're the defender, God has sent.
But even better, in my opinion, in '84, this was a couple years after the heavy metal album, the Ray Charles Singers. And this song, I can't believe it came out in '84. It sounds like it came out in the early '70s or even the late '60s.
So, my friend, let's make music together. I'll play the old, while you sing me the new.
The song title is I Know What It Is to Be Young, but You Don't Know What It Is to Be Old. And it is one of those great, charming, like silly novelty songs.
I have never heard that. I thought I was a big Wells aficionado, but I never even heard of that because he did a lot of little things that people might not be aware of. But he would show up on things like the Dean Martin show and be in sketches with Dean Martin and Tim Conway and people like that.
Did you go to the party last night?
No, I couldn't. I didn't have a thing to wear.
I was there.
How was it?
Well, I'm going to tell you something in the strictest confidence. I don't want you to spill a word of this.
Have you ever known me to spill anything?
Well, Tab and Rock showed up, both wearing identical blazers.
Couldn't you just die?
Or he would go on the Dean Martin celebrity roast and you'd see him laughing at Don Rickles jokes, and I loved that aspect of Orson Welles, that he loved the high and the low. He would do Shakespeare, but then he would slum it and have a wonderful time laughing along with the drunken Dean Martin.
I found some really cool Jack Benny radio shows where he was filling in for Jack Benny. He would host it as a fill-in. It was really cool. Unlike Peter Sellers, he had a real sense of humor about his own flaws and his own faults.
Oh, absolutely. And he's one of the few people that comes out of this not embarrassing.
So Ursula Andrews' Vesper gets kidnapped. So there's this weird scene where he's like, where did she go? And the door guy goes, oh, she was just kidnapped. And he goes, okay, I better go get her. And he gets into a car. It's a real, and Peter Sellers was a car nut. He's in racing car outfit. Suddenly the movie gets absurd again. The kinds of humor in this movie, it's not consistent. No. So you're doing one kind of humor 1 second, and the next second it's like, one of these wacky races movie.
Although the chief thinks he has a faster car than me, I am faster in my Lotus Formula 3.
He's like hamming it up for the camera, looking directly into the camera and joking to the audience in a way that didn't make any sense.
His character before that wasn't doing any of that. And now he's putting on a Scottish accent like Jackie Stewart, the race car driver. But there's also there's the gag where he says to a taxi driver, follow that car, and the taxi driver just goes running after the car.
Well, that was a race car driver.
Yes, follow that car. Yes, sir.
It's a cameo. Sterling Moss was the name of that race car driver. There's so much jarring a storytelling, exposition, the way things flow. But this is the most, right? So he's getting in this car to go rescue Vesper. And then suddenly he's in a torture chair. You have no idea. What happened between those two scenes.
Yeah, no, it's never explained.
It couldn't be more.
There's scene missing. They should just have a card.
There's a whole it should say, yes, just use your imagination. We have no idea how he got here, but somehow he ended up in a torture chair with Orson Welles. The torture scene is sort of psychedelic. They do this sort of like, I don't know, he's losing his mind. I don't know. They're torturing him in a way that makes him sort of lose his mind. And so he goes off into a dream world where it's all smoky, like he's in a smoky dream. It's like a parade of Scotsmen, right? In kilts and pipes.
It's funny. Kilts. They're Scottish. It's
and
funny.
Now I believe that was supposed to be a scene with elephants in it. I believe they were supposed to have a lot of, instead of Scotsmen, it was supposed to be a whole bunch of elephants.
They blew the budget on lions.
So it's a weird dream scene. And then you see this little 2-second cameo of Peter O'Toole, who had been in What's New Pussycat. So he just agreed because, he's being nice. He's being nice about it. He was just like, sure, I'll do it. All right, whatever, I'll do it.
He happened to be near the studio that day or something,
Yeah.
Excuse me. Are you Richard Burton?
No, I'm Peter O'Toole.
Then you're the finest man that ever breathed.
And so
looks like he didn't shave for the occasion. He looks like he has like a beard going on.
So it's totally nonsensical, but it's also supposedly the death scene of Peter Sellers's character. So then you see Vesper in a Scottish kilt kind of takes her bagpipe and starts shooting everybody. Now you don't know if this is a dream. I don't know, but it's supposed to be happening in real life. You just don't know. But according to what this movie is trying to portray to you, you'd never know it. But Peter Sellers actually dies in this scene. His character, that's how they off him. And she just mows everybody down with her bagpipes.
So why does a flying saucer appear in this movie?
Okay, so a flying saucer comes down and someone on a horse, I think it's a horse, kidnaps Mata Bond and abducts her into this flying saucer. It just lands in the middle of London.
In the middle of Trafalgar Square. But why?
So the flying saucer is Smersh. I think the flying saucer is Smersh. Now, why they would choose that tactic to make a fake flying saucer to abduct Mata Bond, I don't know, but it's Smersh. They've taken her to Casino Royale. Casino Royale turns out to be a Smersh headquarters.
The Bond villain lair. It's the classic
the
Bond villain lair.
Right.
Looks
so
great. Looks beautiful.
They go, if you go behind the scenes of this lair, and it's all psychedelic, like it's very geometric, it's very stylized hallways, right?
And I thought this was all taking place in the spaceship. I honestly
I don't
couldn't make head
know.
or tail out of where it was all.
Is it? Maybe it is.
Wrong? I don't know.
You could be right. You could be wrong. You could be
Honestly,
right.
But there's a pod that comes out of the spaceship and it goes into a cave on an island.
Oh, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, and so I think that's where they are through the whole thing, and that's where we meet the mastermind of everything.
Right. So they're running through all these crazy psychedelic hallways. All these women in gladiator outfits, space age Martian like gladiator outfits are shooting at them. And they end up walking through a big eye, which is kind of cool. And they end up in this room and out comes the real villain, the real mastermind, the real person behind all of this. Now go back and think, who was it? Who could it be? It's Woody Allen. It's Woody Allen. Yeah.
Little Jimmy Bond.
Jimmy Bond. And now they're calling him Dr. Noah, because that's funny.
I guess that's funny because it's a reference to Dr. No.
So he was in What's New Pussycat, of course. That was his first writing appearance. What's New Pussycat was Woody Allen's first appearance in any movie. This was his third. And in a letter to a friend, this is what Woody Allen wrote to his friend about the production of this movie. He wrote, "It's a madhouse. I haven't begun filming yet, but saw the sets for my scenes. They are the height of bad pop art, expensive vulgarity, saw rushes, and am dubious, to put it mildly. But probably film will coin a mint. Not money, just a single peppermint. I would like it emphasized and made quite clear that I am not a writer of Casino. I am adding a few ad-lib jokes to my own part, but that's all. In fact, we demanded a letter saying my name cannot appear on screen as writer. Because it took so long to film this, they put him up in a fancy hotel for a really long time where he had nothing to do. And during that time, to pass the time, he wrote Take the Money and Run.
He feels like he's in a different movie. You know, he's doing his early shtick that he used to do, which was sort of cribbed from Bob Hope and people like that. You know, he was sort of the sort of cowardly, clumsy guy. And he's doing some pretty, I got to say, pretty good physical comedy. From some pretty good physical
I think
shtick,
it's almost the best part of the movie.
He was good as a physical comedian, actually. You know.
Yeah, and then they make him so he can't speak when he's around James Bond, David Niven.
He can't speak.
Never could in my presence. Psychological block he's had since childhood, based on hero worship.
It's supposed to add color that he can't speak. I mean, it's just bizarre. And then, all right, so then it goes downhill. Like that scene is sort of amusing because he's just so good, you know, at physical comedy and everything. So then he's in a room with this woman. He is strapped to the table. And I'm like, who is this woman? And then I realized we did see her earlier in this movie. There was a scene with Terrence Cooper where he's picking out female James Bonds. And he had all these women strutting around in skimpy clothing. And this woman comes out in this really super cool, awesome dress, actually. And he picks her out as like the best, and then he flips her. And you're like, okay, so you don't really even make note of this woman because she's in a room full of other women. Yeah. But for some reason, you're supposed to remember her because here she is again, strapped to a table. You're supposed to be like,
it's not supposed to be the same person. Who even knows?
It's the same person. It's the same person. She is one of the top billings. That's Dahlia. That's Dahlia Lavey. I don't know. Everybody ends up in go-karts, space age go-karts. I don't know why, but that happens. But then they end up.
They're cool looking.
They're cool looking, and they end up in the casino area of Casino. So Woody Allen. So this woman, Dahlia Lavey, she slips a pill into Woody Allen's drink, Dr. Noah's drink, And Dr. Noah
A
is
nuclear
now,
bomb.
it's a bomb. So if he burps like 100 and
400,
something,
I think it's 400
400
times.
times,
Yeah.
he's going to go off like an atomic bomb. So he's, and it's kind of cute because like every time he burps,
Yeah.
they have a little cartoon thing coming out of his mouth.
And
which is
again,
cute.
I must raise the specter of 9-year-old me. That was hilarious.
It is
That
kind
was
of funny.
one
It is
again, one of the things I remembered and
It's kind
retained
of
from the
funny.
movie. That was hilarious. That was
It's cute.
wonderful.
Oh, so David Prowse has a little cameo as
Oh, right.
Frankenstein.
You see Frankenstein's monster
Frankenstein, yeah.
played by David Prowse,
Just
who then
walking.
played Frankenstein's monster again in
Yeah.
1976 in Frankenstein Meets the Monster from Hell, I'd like to point out.
Yeah, he just, and that was his first role ever. And he just walks through. He was originally supposed to walk through as a big Winnie the Pooh. Yes, Winnie the Pooh.
Of course.
They changed it to
Why not?
Frankenstein, and that was his first role. And of course, that's when Stanley Kubrick said he needs to be in Clockwork Orange.
David Prowse went on to play Darth Vader, but of course he didn't provide the voice of Darth Vader. The voice of Darth Vader was James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
George Lucas's
Right.
first choice for the voice of Darth Vader was Orson Welles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. They almost
That is interesting.
got together. Film.
So we end up back in the main part of the casino, and I don't know, they call the cavalry in, they call the Americans in, and they're cowboys. The Americans are cowboys.
Yeah, it turns.
It
It's
includes,
like, again, it's a free for all. It's just whatever.
yeah, what it is it's a big honking finale with things flying around in the air, with bubbles, of course, because
Of
bubbles,
course,
they're
'cause
fun.
It's the 60s. It's
They're
like yeah, and the
fun. Bubbles
yeah,
are
and the
fun.
music is going. Da, ba, ba, da. It seems like well, we have access to the costume department. Let's dress a bunch of guys up as cowboys and Indians and
Yes,
have them
Indians,
come in for
Native
no
Americans.
apparent reason whatsoever. And not only do they come in and start fighting, but they also start dancing. You know,
Yes.
just like why
Yes.
not? Because the music's playing. Only we can hear the music, but they're dancing to it. And, just what?
There's
It's a
seals,
free-for-all. Right, actual live
seals. There's
seals.
a chimp. There's a chimp at one
There
point.
had to be a chimp.
I
at
don't
some point.
know. I don't know.
Throw everything at the ending because we don't actually. And this is a good point to mention. There is no ending.
Oh, the Keystone Cops. They bring the
Right,
Keystone Cops in.
right, and yeah, the Keystone Cops.
Oh my gosh.
And,
I don't know. It's like it is just kitchen sink finale.
Yeah.
That is just supposed to be fun. And,
and then it was it's the kitchen sink, and then Woody Allen explodes and everybody's dead.
Woody
And
Allen
that's
explodes.
that's the ending. It's over.
That's it.
Credits roll. Everybody's dead. Credits roll. It was all for nothing.
That's it. Now.
Yeah.
Now.
And of course, and there's a scene where at the end everybody's an angel. They're all playing
Yes.
harps, and they all now this is what was you saw this in the opening credits. So if you could put two and two together, you'd figure out they were all going to die eventually at some point and all be playing harps. I need to lie down now.
It's, so I hope that we've helped you listeners through this movie because it's really, I hope we've added some understanding, make it a little easier for when you go through it. If you haven't already, now it'll be a little bit easier. Just go through it at double speed. That's
This has been our tribute to the Daniel Craig era of James Bond.
I'm just doing a little addendum because there was something really important on that story of Casino Royale that I forgot to say at the end, which is that Charlie Feldman, the producer who we talked about at the beginning of the episode, died sadly very shortly after the making of that film. Don't ask. And so I wanted to, when you read a lot about Casino Royale, you're going to hear a lot about Charlie Feldman's death because everybody blames Peter Sellers. Yes, they do. And they're quite serious about it. I'm just going to read you a little excerpt from the life and death of Peter Sellers. Sellers' fingerprints are all over Casino Royale. It was he who got it to slip its sprockets, and he did destroy Feldman's health, something he maintained Feldman was getting him to do on purpose. Quote from Peter Sellers, "Charlie Feldman is going to die," he confidently predicted. "And the reason he'll die is so that he can blame me. He'll say, 'There, Sellers killed me.' He'll do it to spite me." This is the book. You have to be a special sort of raving lunatic to believe that people will actually drop off the twig to get one over on you. But sure enough, a few months later, Feldman made the announcement that he was suffering from terminal stomach cancer. And sure enough, he told anyone who'd listen that it's that bastard Sellers. Sellers has done this to me. And that's a really sad ending. But I wanted to make sure I got that in. I had forgotten when we first recorded. Now, just a little extra bonus bit to attach to the Casino Royale episode we just did. we wanted to have a little show and tell about Orson Welles because, like, when are we ever going to talk about Orson Welles again? He's not in that many comedies, to tell you the truth. So we wanted to grab the opportunity because we had this really cool bit of show and tell. Well, Joe Dater did anyway, and that's what's happening here. This is Joe Dater, actually. Joe? Oh, there you are. Yes, yeah. So tell our audience what you have for them.
Yes, well, I am a huge Orson Welles fan. And when people can hear me say that I am, other times not so much. And so I built the Build Your Own Orson Welles from the April 1982 issue of National Lampoon. Now, this was something that was in the issue as a joke. It was presented as a kind of build-it-yourself paper craft of Orson Welles. Now, I wondered if anyone ever actually built it. I certainly didn't build it at the time when I was a teenager. I would have had to have cut up the magazine in order to do that. And a little thing happened, though, last year, which was the election. And for the nail-biting few days after the election, I wanted to block out all media. And so I decided to give myself a project that would involve sitting at my desk with headphones on and not checking Twitter. So I chose this, and I went and found the pages from the old National Lampoon issue. I didn't cut them up. I scanned them into my computer, and I did a lot of cleanup of them in Photoshop. I synced it up so that the image on one page would match up with the page on the other, and I printed them out on cardstock, and here you have Orson Welles. Now, the great thing about this papercraft Orson Welles is it's meant to be a kind of a dig at Orson. On the platform, it says he is Orson Welles, actor, auteur, and TV panelist, which he was pretty much the three things he was known for in the 1980s. He did a lot of episodes of Merv and Dinah Shore and a lot of Dean Martin celebrity roasts. But he was also a genius, and so he's depicted here wearing his cape and hat from the movie F for Fake, which is a sort of a movie about, well, it's hard to say what it's a movie about. It's hard to even say that it's a movie, but what it is a work of genius. But if you open up the genius, you'll see inside there's a diorama of Orson performing magic for Merv Griffin on the Merv Griffin Show. Now, like I said, I built this 38 years after it was originally conceived. A couple of months after I built it, I heard from Todd Carroll, who was the National Lampoon writer who conceived of it and who basically wrote the copy that went along with it. I'm not sure, unfortunately, who the artist was who created these images, though. So Todd Carroll found out that I built this and wrote me a letter saying that he was very flattered that I had built it. And I took this opportunity to ask him a bunch of annoying questions, like, when you were conceiving it, did you imagine anyone would actually build it? And he said he did a lot of cutting out bits of paper to make sure that they fit together. So because he felt that Orson deserved that treatment. And I absolutely agree. I'm one of those people who unabashedly loves Orson Welles as a genius and also as a figure of fun. And so as much as I adore Citizen Kane and can watch it over and over again, I also love listening to the drunken wine commercial he did, or listening to the frozen peas commercial where he has a meltdown. I love both those things equally. And this embodies both of those sides of Orson equally. The genius and the guy doing magic tricks on the Merv Griffin Show. The other thing Todd Carroll said to me was that at the time he conceived this papercraft Orson Welles for the Lampoon, he was working on a film with Henry Jaglom, the filmmaker. And as people who know Henry Jaglom know, that he was a friend and a worshiper of Orson Welles, and even put Orson in one of his films. And Todd Carroll told me that at the time, Henry Jaglom thought this was, quote, blasphemous.
I think Orson would have loved it. I'm just guessing.
Orson would have loved it. Orson, if nothing else, had a great sense of humor and a sense of humor about himself.
It's beautiful. I mean, it really works. It totally works. I love it. Could you show the close-up of the inside? I really see the influence that ended up in Chris Ware's artwork, who used to, he ended up doing things sort of a little bit like this. in some of his large scale books that, he'd have sort of these fake cutouts. Anyway, I'm sure he was influenced by this for sure. Any last words?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Joe, for this episode of Show and Tell. Hey, this is just a reminder to please like and subscribe. If you'd like to tip us or donate and support our work, we'd really be so grateful. If you go to our main YouTube page, the banner at the top in the right-hand corner, there is a donate button. Thank you so much.